Tales of Marzuban. This is the Book of Marzuban. Chapter 1. Marzuban was the son of Sherwin, who ruled Tabaristan. Sherwin had 5 sons, all of them intelligent and capable. After Sherwin's death, his oldest son became the ruler, and the other brothers supported him. As time passed, jealousy and desire for power grew among the brothers, each wanting to be king. Marzuban, known for his virtues, wanted to avoid conflict. He aimed to lead a meaningful life and focus on spiritual happiness. He worried that the king might misunderstand his intentions. To prevent misunderstandings, Marzuban decided to leave the region for a distant place where his brothers couldn't reach him. This way, they could continue their activities without interruption, and their brotherly bond wouldn't weaken. Some important people in the state learned about Marzuban's plans and asked him to write a book. They wanted a book full of wisdom and clever advice that could guide them in both their current lives and the afterlife. They believed such a book would honor Marzuban's qualities and provide guidance for generations. They also wanted Marzuban to advise the king through this book. Marzuban considered their request but didn't immediately agree. He left the decision to the king's will. After some time, he humbly approached the king to ask for permission to leave and write the book. The king was unsure and sought advice from his advisors. The prince heard what they said but didn't agree right away. He let the decision rest with the king's choice. After some time of thinking, he stood up and approached the king respectfully. He asked for permission, humbly explaining that he wanted to leave for another land and write a book with good advice. The king wasn't sure what to do. Later, after the person who asked had left, an advisor came to the king. The king asked the advisor, "What do you think? Should I let my brother go ahead with these plans he's determined to do?" The advisor replied, "Considering true judgment and careful thinking, it would be the right conclusion. Let him leave for another place. This way, the enemies of the kingdom would be reduced by one, and a problem would be resolved." The advisor added, "Regarding his wish to write a book, you should know that he might indirectly criticize your way of ruling, and it could become a topic of gossip around the world. When he proposes to advise you, he's implying that he knows more than you. However, that's not the reality. His arguments don't hold up." The advisor suggested, "If you allow the prince to speak in my presence, I can show you how impractical and flawed his advice is in different ways. I'll also reveal his true character and help you understand where he stands among philosophers. I'll show you the true value of the knowledge he wants to share." The next day, the king gathered a group of respected advisors, known for their wisdom, in his private quarters. The prince and the vizier were there too. At the vizier's request, the king spoke to Marzuban. "My brother," he said, "your words show you care about me. It's clear you have deep feelings for me. So, it would be smart for you to share your thoughts openly. Say everything that makes sense and share your wise ideas. Your insights are very valuable." The prince started speaking. He used gentle words and kind phrases to talk to the people. He agreed with the king's request and blessed the royal court. He said, "Since you've allowed me to speak, please listen kindly to what I have to say. Advice given during discussions is best received when listened to respectfully. Words are like buds that can grow into flowers, but they can't become actions without being nurtured by a fair hearing. I've read about your history and see problems in the foundation of your rule and the basis of your laws. Your officials are taking advantage of the people's goods and exceeding their authority. The experienced market is suffering due to carelessness, and your subjects are confused by the misconduct of those in charge. These actions go against the ways of your ancestors and don't match your honorable lineage and noble origins. Until now, I've stayed quiet, as they say, don't speak or act without being asked by kings. But today, since you asked me to speak, I will share what I know and fulfill my duty to my family, even more so to you, my kin and brother. It's said, the responsibility of family can't be cut by a sword, and the bond of brotherhood is more valuable than any jewel. This is shown in what Lady Hanboy said." "What's that story?" the king asked. The prince replied with a story. There was a king named Zaak who had serpents growing from his shoulders, and these serpents needed the brains of freshly slain youths as food. During his rule, there lived a woman named Hanboy. One day, her son, husband, and brother were all taken to be sacrificed. She went to Zaak's palace, lamenting the situation and asking why 3 men were taken from her household that day. Zaak heard her cries and learned about the situation. He allowed her to choose one of the 3 to be freed. At the prison gate, Hanboy saw her husband, son, and brother. She felt torn between them, wanting to save each of them. Ultimately, she chose her brother, as she believed she could potentially marry again and have another husband and son, but she couldn't have another brother. Zaak, hearing of her choice, spared all 3, her son, husband, and brother. The prince shared this story to illustrate that no one could replace the king, and his only desire was for the king's well-being. He expressed concern that unforeseen misfortunes might disrupt the ways of their ancestors and threaten their lineage or rule. The king responded, "I can see the truth in your words based on my own beliefs. I trust that your words are sincere. However, to have a comprehensive understanding, I'd like you to hear my minister's perspective as well. By engaging in a dialogue, we can reach a fair and complete conclusion, revealing the essence of the matter." The prince replied, "It's clear that the minister is skilled in language, judgment, and intellect. He's adept at presenting opposing views and counter-arguments. Yet, insisting too much doesn't lead to better understanding, and strong advocacy doesn't necessarily convey good advice. I've shared my thoughts honestly and to the best of my ability. If you accept my words, then the right course becomes evident. But if not, remember that there is no compulsion in religion." The minister, employing smooth speech, began to speak. The prince's advice aims to strengthen the realm and unite the kingdom. Though these suggestions could work with divine help and past royal support, we know that true security comes from discipline. Our approach aligns with law and reason. Not punishing wrongdoers is as harmful as punishing the innocent. One of Ardashir, son of Babak's sayings goes like this: "Sometimes, a bit of bloodshed can prevent larger bloodshed, and a little pain can lead to overall health." This idea aligns with the words in the Quran, "Through suffering you shall have life." It's important to understand that people today have become corrupt in character and have shifted their loyalty from the ruler to the temptations of evil. The influence of misguided desires and the idea of independence have taken root in people's minds, leading them to aspire for power. They wrongly believe that anyone can achieve sovereignty through mere effort and agitation, without realizing that kings are chosen by a higher power. The authority of divine respect accompanies the gifts of fate. In the past, sovereignty first rested with apostles, then kings, and then sages. However, nowadays, deceit is mistaken for cleverness, and flattering the king is seen as astuteness. When people deviate from the right path, it becomes our duty to take actions that secure the welfare of the realm. We must be strict in punishment when necessary. The measures taken to counter their harmful actions against the state and restore its security might seem severe, but they highlight how these individuals have disrupted its order and weakened its foundations. The prince responded, "The king is like the radiant sun, and his people are like the lit lamps. When the sun shines, the lamp's light cannot compare, and its borrowed brightness fades before the sun's powerful rays. Similarly, when the king shows kindness and his royal attitude influences his people, their behavior aligns with his conduct. Even common flaws in people's nature take on a unique aspect. It's said that destiny gauges the king's heart to determine how to treat him, leaning towards the same treatment he prefers. When the ruler changes, the times change. And as long as God keeps favoring a people, he won't remove a king's responsibility. This is illustrated in the story of Karanuma and Barumgur. What happened in that story? The king asked. The tale of Karanuma and Barumgur goes like this. One day, Barumgur went hunting. Suddenly, a dark cloud, thicker than the night of a lovesick youth and more watery than the tears of a parting lover, covered the sky. Lightning struck the cloud, creating mist and a fierce wind, turning daylight into darkness. The world seemed to be engulfed in blackness. Amid this darkness, Barumgur and his companions were separated. He ended up at an estate where lived a wealthy peasant named Karanuma. Not recognizing the king, Karanuma offered hospitality that didn't match royal expectations, failing to show the proper respect expected from kings. Even though Barumgur didn't show it outwardly, he felt displeased and noticed the lack of proper treatment. On that night, the shepherd returned from the fields and told Kuranuma that the sheep had given less milk than usual. Kuranuma had a beautiful and kind-hearted daughter. He thought that maybe the king's mood had affected their fortunes, so he suggested moving to a different place. His daughter disagreed, pointing out they had plenty of food and drinks at home, so it would be better to spend something to entertain the guest. The peasant decided to offer a small tray of well-prepared dishes and wine to Barumgur. They shared drinks, and as the wine flowed, Barumgur's inhibitions faded. He started talking more openly. During the banquet, he asked the peasant if he had a pretty slave girl who could provide him company. The peasant, thinking his daughter was well protected and wise enough to handle the situation, agreed and sent his daughter to Barumgur. When she appeared before the king, her beauty was like the sun entering a room or the gaze of Mars falling on Venus. After just a glance, Barumgur felt better, and her conversation eased his troubles. He became enamored with her, his heart lost in a love deeper than any hole the peasant could dig. This story reminds us of the love between Kuranuma and Barumgur. Still, a part of the king's heart clung to the idea that he would marry the maiden once he returned home. He planned to reward her father generously for his hospitality. The following day, the shepherd returned with news of an abundance of sheep's milk, surprising everyone. Father and daughter believed that the king's kindness had brought about this change of fortune, causing the milk to return to its usual flow. Unaware that his own daughter was the source of the milk, the father thought this turnaround was due to the king's favor. Little did he know that his daughter would be taken to the king's palace as his bride the next day. When Barumgur returned to his palace, he rewarded the peasant by granting him ownership of the village and its surrounding areas. As for the daughter, her marriage was arranged and she was presented before the king in a dignified manner. This story illustrates how fortune follows the king's intentions. It shows that a king must possess kindness, benevolence, good communication skills, and a calm demeanor when dealing with his people. Without these qualities, people may form opposing groups and abandon him. It emphasizes the importance of fairness and not inflicting general punishments for individual offenses. Ultimately, the king should uphold the traditions of his forefathers and remain upright. Failure to do so may lead to a fate similar to the music-loving wolves. Still, a part of the king's heart clung to the idea that he would marry the maiden once he returned home. He planned to reward her father generously for his hospitality. The following day, the shepherd returned with news of an abundance of sheep's milk, surprising everyone. Father and daughter believed that the king's kindness had brought about this change of fortune, causing the milk to return to its usual flow. Unaware that his own daughter was the source of the milk, the father thought this turnaround was due to the king's favor. Little did he know that his daughter would be taken to the king's palace as his bride the next day. When Barumgur returned to his palace, he rewarded the peasant by granting him ownership of the village and its surrounding areas. As for the daughter, her marriage was arranged and she was presented before the king in a dignified manner. This story illustrates how fortune follows the king's intentions. It shows that a king must possess kindness, benevolence, good communication skills, and a calm demeanor when dealing with his people. Without these qualities, people may form opposing groups and abandon him. It emphasizes the importance of fairness and not inflicting general punishments for individual offenses. Ultimately, the king should uphold the traditions of his forefathers and remain upright. Failure to do so may lead to a fate similar to the music-loving wolves. What happened next? The king asked. Once upon a time, there was a wolf that lived in a forest. One day, he roamed the hunting grounds searching for prey, but he couldn't catch anything. Nearby, a shepherd was tending his sheep, and the wolf watched from a distance. However, the shepherd's protective watchfulness made it hard for the wolf to catch any prey. In the evening, as the shepherd gathered his flock, a young goat got left behind. The wolf saw it and thought of it as a tempting prize. The goat, sensing its danger, cleverly approached the wolf and spoke confidently. It claimed that the shepherd had sent it as a reward for the wolf's restraint and kindness, even offering to sing to entertain the wolf before being eaten. The wolf fell for the goat's words and ordered it to sing. The goat sang so loudly that the shepherd heard it and rushed to its rescue with a cudgel. Frightened, the wolf escaped and reflected on his foolishness. He realized he had let himself be deceived by the goat's story and regretted not acting sooner. He wondered why he had let such nonsense distract him from his goal. I shared this story to highlight that deviating from the traditions of one's forebears can have serious consequences. Different rules apply to inherited and newly acquired kingships. A king who has earned his position through effort and struggle must carefully consider his actions and their consequences. On the other hand, a king who gains power effortlessly might overlook the importance of upholding previous laws and guidelines, which can weaken the foundation of his rule and lead to decay within the kingdom. What happened next? The king asked. Once upon a time, there was a wolf that lived in a forest. One day, he roamed the hunting grounds searching for prey, but he couldn't catch anything. Nearby, a shepherd was tending his sheep, and the wolf watched from a distance. However, the shepherd's protective watchfulness made it hard for the wolf to catch any prey. In the evening, as the shepherd gathered his flock, a young goat got left behind. The wolf saw it and thought of it as a tempting prize. The goat, sensing its danger, cleverly approached the wolf and spoke confidently. It claimed that the shepherd had sent it as a reward for the wolf's restraint and kindness, even offering to sing to entertain the wolf before being eaten. The wolf fell for the goat's words and ordered it to sing. The goat sang so loudly that the shepherd heard it and rushed to its rescue with a cudgel. Frightened, the wolf escaped and reflected on his foolishness. He realized he had let himself be deceived by the goat's story and regretted not acting sooner. He wondered why he had let such nonsense distract him from his goal. I shared this story to highlight that deviating from the traditions of one's forebears can have serious consequences. Different rules apply to inherited and newly acquired kingships. A king who has earned his position through effort and struggle must carefully consider his actions and their consequences. On the other hand, a king who gains power effortlessly might overlook the importance of upholding previous laws and guidelines, which can weaken the foundation of his rule and lead to decay within the kingdom. The young goat, suffering and in pain, let out a loud cry of sorrow that echoed down the mountainside and reached the shepherd's ears. The shepherd reacted quickly, grabbing a strong stick, and rushed towards the wolf with remarkable speed. The wolf's hopes were dashed by the sudden attack, and he fled to a quiet corner, feeling disappointed and hungry. He pondered why he had hesitated and allowed himself to be fooled by the goat's story, which had distracted him from his goal. He questioned why he had let his desire be controlled by such a tale. The storyteller shared this fable to highlight the danger of abandoning the traditions of one's ancestors. There are different rules for inherited kingship compared to newly acquired rule. A king who gains power through his own strength and effort must carefully consider his actions and circumstances, making and breaking decisions in alignment with his goals. On the other hand, a king who inherits power without facing challenges or working hard might neglect the laws and guidelines established by his predecessors. If such a king exceeds these boundaries, it could weaken the structure of the realm and empire. Lacking experience and motivation, his reign may lead to significant decay in the foundation of the kingdom. At these words, the minister was surprised and angry. He accused the prince of making up tricky and deceitful tales to confuse the situation and make his own words seem true. The prince responded, saying that when someone pretends to be pious to gain support, it's often because they lack means, have committed wrongs, or fear an enemy that only innocence can defend against. He asserted that he had nothing to hide and his honor didn't need deceitful tactics. Reflecting on the world's beginning and end and the ultimate judgment of the Creator, he believed the king was wise enough to judge fairly and dispel envy and ambition. The minister realized the prince was winning the debate, especially when considering whether the man was honorable or disgraced. He acknowledged that the prince's arguments were strong. The minister then criticized the prince for thinking that his untruths had been overlooked due to his intelligence and knowledge, asserting it was the king's presence that silenced him. He explained that those in advantageous positions who lack courage, kind women without tenderness, brave men who never attack enemies, wealthy individuals who lack generosity, educated people who lack discretion, and people of noble birth without good manners are of little benefit to others. The prince said, "While the minister has been listening to my words, supported by universal agreement and the views of worldly scholars, He's been like a wild horse that only stops its restlessness when whipped. It's like a schoolboy who behaves because he fears punishment from the teacher, but outside the school, he abandons sense for childishness. Or like a lame donkey that appears fine in comfort but suddenly shows lameness when faced with carrying a load. Until now, as long as his true nature was hidden, everything seemed fine. But now that we're moving beyond patience's limit, his stubbornness is showing. As we've ended the path of mutual understanding, we can speak more openly. Those who hold positions in the king's service, without merit of their own, reveal their true colors when they retire. They're like an over-adorned woman whose borrowed beauty fades, exposing her ugliness. Or they're like a wall with dazzling pictures that turns out to be just mud when washed. Any king who closes his eyes to the faults of his subordinates and hopes to rule with leniency is like the jackal that rode the ass and met its end due to foolishness. What happened in that story? The king asked. The prince replied, I've heard that there was a jackal living by the side of a garden. Every day, it would enter through a hole in the garden wall and eat the grapes and other fruits, causing a lot of damage. The gardener grew tired of this, and one day, when the jackal was dozing off, the gardener closed the hole, trapping the jackal. Then he beat it with a stick until it lost consciousness. The jackal pretended to be dead, and the gardener threw it out of the garden with a stake. After recovering a bit from the beating, and fearing the gardener's wrath, the jackal left the garden area, limping and dragging one foot. It made its way to a wood where it knew a wolf. When the wolf saw the jackal, he asked, Why are you limping and moaning like this? The jackal replied, The story of the events that led to this unfortunate calamity is so distressing that even friends would find it hard to listen to. In fact, if I were to tell it to my enemies, their hearts would soften and sympathize. But despite all that, the suffering I endured was nothing compared to my longing to see you again. The days of my life were filled with distress due to our separation, and finally, the intense desire to be reunited with you compelled me to seek you out. The wolf responded, Your presence brings me happiness beyond measure. No gift or inspiration can compare to the joy and blessing of having you here. Your sudden appearance has lifted my spirits and removed my worries. They exchanged affectionate words, rejoicing in the reunion of their souls in the world of bodies. Then the wolf mentioned that he had been hunting for 3 days without success, and now that the jackal had arrived as a guest, there was no food left for their entertainment. The wolf intended to go into the wilderness to find something to eat. The jackal suggested, I have an acquaintance nearby, a donkey. I can deceive him and lead him into your grasp. He could provide us with food for several days. If you can do that without trouble, then let it be so. With Allah's blessing, the wolf agreed. The jackal went on his way until he reached the entrance of a village, where he saw a heavily burdened donkey standing by a mill. The donkey legs were bent under the weight of its load. The jackal approached and asked about its circumstances. Then he proposed a plan. How long will you continue to toil under the burden of humans? I know of a meadow where we can live freely and comfortably. It's a green paradise, safe from all harm, and we can enjoy our lives together in peace. The donkey was intrigued by the idea and agreed to accompany the jackal to this idyllic meadow for a life of ease and companionship. As they walked, the jackal said, I've traveled quite a distance. If you could carry me on your back for a while, I could rest, and we'd reach our destination faster. The donkey agreed, and the jackal hopped onto the donkey back. They continued on their way until they neared the wood. From a distance, the donkey spotted a wolf and began to doubt the jackal's intentions. He thought to himself, Am I rushing into danger? Am I willingly walking towards my own demise? The jackal's tales and illusions have blinded my good judgment and led me into this risky situation. I must find a way out. Stopping in his tracks, the donkey said, Hey, jackal, I can see the wonders and beauty of your homeland in the distance. I can even smell the fragrant flowers and herbs. If I had known about this wonderful place earlier, I would have come here immediately. But let me turn back for now. Tomorrow, under a lucky star and with careful preparation, I'll come back here. The jackal, realizing that the donkey might not return if he left alone, acted as if he agreed. He said, You're absolutely right. It's strange how some people trade the certainty of the present for uncertain promises in the future. The donkey responded, "Your words are true. However, I have a book of counsels passed down from my father. It's full of valuable wisdom. I always carry it with me, even placing it under my pillow when I sleep. Without it, I have troubling dreams. I'll go get the book and bring it with me." The jackal thought, if he goes alone, he won't return. I need to change his mind. So he said, "You're wise to follow your father's advice. If you can remember any of those counsels, I'd appreciate you sharing them with me." The donkey then recalled, "There are 4 pieces of advice. The first is, never go without the book of counsels. I can't remember the other 3 right now, but I'll recite them from the book when we get there." "Let's go back now and return tomorrow, as you said," the jackal replied. The donkey hastened his pace, moving as swiftly as a racing camel with a broken rein or a bird escaping from a torn net. They reached the village gate, and the donkey suddenly remembered the other 3 pieces of advice. He asked, "Would you like to hear the rest?" The second advice was, when something bad happens, imagine something even worse. The third advice was, don't choose a foolish friend over a clever enemy. And the fourth advice was, always be cautious about having a wolf as a neighbor or a jackal as a friend. As soon as the jackal heard these words, he realized that he shouldn't delay any longer. He jumped off the donkey back and fled immediately. However, the village dogs were close behind, and the unfortunate jackal met a grim end. I shared this story to help you understand that it's never wise to constantly entertain malicious thoughts and stray from the path of honesty due to procrastination and false hopes. Another lesson here is that a king should be careful not to give a minister too much power and control over the kingdom's affairs, and not to grant them complete immunity from accountability for their wrongdoings. Otherwise, the minister might become a co-ruler, leading to serious problems. The prince openly revealed his hidden concerns and thoughts about the minister's flaws, speaking frankly and directly. The king sympathetically understood that the prince was speaking the truth. He asked the prince for a solution to rectify the situation and show appreciation for the benefits received. The king then decided to remove the minister from his position and disgrace him, as he failed to show gratitude for the favors he had received. The king treated his brother, the prince, with high regard and praised his honesty and wisdom. The king allowed the prince to choose a prosperous province as his new home and encouraged him to write the book he desired, which would satisfy the king's thirst for knowledge. Following the king's command, the prince found inner peace and brought forth the long-hidden treasure of wisdom. This treasure, neglected for thousands of years, was now restored and rejuvenated in the prosperous reign of the king. The hope was that the king's court would continue to thrive, promoting virtue and learning, and that the king would find happiness and success, defending the faith and the realm. This concludes the story with the hope that the king's reign would be prosperous and virtuous, and that the prince's wisdom would flourish, benefiting all. The story goes that there was an ancient king with 6 sons known for their generosity, dignity, and honor. The eldest son was exceptional in both appearance and character. As the king's rule was coming to an end, he gathered his sons to give them advice. He reminded them that he had experienced both the ups and downs of life and had always kept in mind the importance of preparing for the future. Knowing that his time was ending, the king used the metaphor of the sun setting to explain his imminent death. He reassured his sons that he was leaving behind capable and virtuous heirs. He emphasized the importance of avoiding evil influences and shared a cautionary tale about a peasant and a serpent. The eldest prince, the most distinguished among the sons, inquired about the story the king mentioned. The peasant and the serpent. Once upon a time, a peasant had become friends with a serpent living near a mountain. He noticed that people often pretended to be one thing while being something else, which made him trust the serpent's straightforward behavior more. So, he preferred the company of the serpent over deceitful humans. Whenever the peasant showed up, the serpent would come out of its hole and eat the food he brought. One cold day, the peasant found the serpent coiled up and weak due to the weather. Feeling sympathy and being used to their friendship, he placed the serpent in a bag and hung it over his donkey head to warm it up. He left to gather firewood. As the serpent regained its strength from the warmth, its true nature emerged, and it fatally bit the donkey. Then it slithered away. The king explained this story to show that being close to wicked people can lead to adopting their ways. He advised his sons to support each other in good times and bad, and not to give up on old friends easily. He emphasized the importance of preparing for the afterlife by doing good in this world. The merchant's slave. The eldest prince asked for another story, so the prince shared the story of a merchant's slave. Once, there was a merchant who had a smart, resourceful, and successful slave. The slave had done many helpful things for his master and earned his gratitude. One day, the master told the slave that after one more sea voyage, he would free him and provide him with money to start a new life on his own. The slave happily prepared for the journey, loaded goods onto a ship, and set sail. However, after a few days at sea, a sudden storm arose, wrecking the ship and destroying all his hopes. Clinging to a sea turtle, he survived and eventually reached an island with date palm trees. He stayed there for a while, looking for food and hoping for rescue. After some time, he ventured forth on foot and reached a city surrounded by lush cultivated lands. The city was filled with people enjoying music, games, and festivities. Their lively sounds echoed everywhere, and their colorful decorations and music filled the air. The slave asked, "What's happening here?" They replied, "We're going to greet the new king who has taken over this city. He's coming from a realm beyond our knowledge, and all this pomp and splendor you see are signs of his reign." Amazed, the slave rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Some important figures approached, kissed his hand, and led out a magnificent horse. Its gear was adorned with gems, and it was swift as the wind. The slave mounted the horse and they reached an extraordinary castle. The garden was like paradise, and the lake was enchanting. The slave was asked to step down, and they showered him with silver and gold coins. Incense filled the air. The people declared him their king and offered their loyalty. The slave realized he needed to understand this unexpected situation. He organized tasks and responsibilities, picking a trustworthy man to assist him. He focused on strengthening his position as the new king. This man, who was respected and admired by his peers, called him aside one day for a private conversation. After they were seated and alone, he spoke frankly, "I want to understand your commitment to truth and loyalty, and your compassion towards me. I trust your words and actions for maintaining order and ensuring our well-being. I need you to explain why the people of this city handed me control without any apparent reason, granting me power over a kingdom that couldn't have been conquered by force. Please tell me why they chose me." The man replied, "Master, every year around this time, someone like you arrives from the direction you came. They welcome him, let him rule for a year, and then they force him out to the wilderness surrounding the city. There, he's left to wander in fear and distress." The slave pondered for a while, searching for a solution. He discovered a plan others had overlooked. He looked up and said, "Your insight has revealed a way out for me. I now have a means to escape this situation, and your assistance will be crucial for its success. With your help, I can achieve my goal and show my gratitude to you." The servant prepared himself to carry out the upcoming instructions. The slave continued, "Pay close attention to the directions I'm about to give you, and ensure that you carry them out diligently and promptly. Keep the rewards that await you at the end of this task in your mind throughout the hardships you'll face. This will make it easier to overcome any challenges that arise. Remember, difficult situations can only be escaped by enduring hardships, persisting through humiliation, and confidently facing whatever obstacles arise. Your task is to construct several ships on the riverbank. Gather skilled craftsmen, engineers, and designers from this and other cities. Transport them across the river to the wilderness, where they'll cultivate the land and build a city. This will be my destination when I leave. We'll find happiness and contentment in that fertile region. Choose a suitable area with fertile soil for farming, and send skilled individuals equipped with tools and materials on ships to that location. They should continuously transport necessary items and materials from the city, using funds from the treasury as needed, always remembering that spending on worthy goals is never wasteful." The servant willingly accepted his task. With determination, he organized groups of artisans and skilled workers, transporting them to the designated location. He instructed master craftsmen to build a city, marking out its layout, erecting mansions, palaces, and decorative structures. They adorned the walls with various colors and brought luxurious furnishings, creating a royal atmosphere. Gardens, orchards, and waterways were meticulously planned, with streams flowing like those of mythical figures. The city was furnished with goods, food, drink, women, and animals, ensuring its prosperity. As the year's end approached and the time for the slave's departure drew near, citizens gathered to dethrone him, as was their custom. The slave had prepared for this moment, and he was placed in a ship and taken to a dry riverbed. His loyal followers welcomed him, and he found solace in the meadows and gardens. He rested there, his aspirations renewed and his fortunes secured. "Now, my sons," said the king, "listen closely and focus your attention to grasp the lesson from this story. So, you should understand that the story of the slave in the ship represents the journey of an unborn child, starting from the moment of conception and undergoing various stages of development within the womb for 9 months. At the end of this period, the child's physical form is fully formed, ready to receive its rational spirit and prepared for the final step of the creation process, the infusion of the soul into the body. The shipwreck, arrival on the island, and the welcoming of the multitude are symbolic of the breaking of the amniotic sac during birth, allowing the child to emerge into the world. At this point, caregivers such as parents, nurses, and midwives are there to nurture and protect the child as he grows into adulthood. As the child reaches the stage of independence and decision-making, he must be conscious of the preparations needed for his future. Just as the slave prepared the city for his departure, the child must also prepare for the transition to the eternal realm. He should accumulate the virtues and good deeds that will ensure his well-being in the hereafter, rather than being lured by the temporary allure of worldly distractions. If he becomes ensnared by the illusions of this world and indulges in pride, his efforts will be in vain. He might reach the afterlife unprepared, facing a grim existence. It is crucial to recognize the impermanence of worldly pleasures and focus on preparing for the lasting abode beyond this life. The prince said, "Your wise advice has touched my heart deeply, just like a revitalizing touch. It's like the story of how the Messiah brought life to another person through Allah's word. Similarly, you've shared valuable wisdom with me, much like the figure Khizr, bringing life-giving knowledge. But honestly, I can't trust my brothers, even if they seem understanding and kind. Once you leave, they might recklessly pursue a life of comfort and wealth, ignoring any restraint. This pursuit of material wealth could turn them against me. Right now, such thoughts might be hidden, but tomorrow, unexpected troubles could arise. While you still have control, I urge you not to let me fall victim to uncertain circumstances. Instead, help me secure a role in governing the kingdom. This way, we'll be on equal footing, and the right path for each of us will be clear. We must follow these paths diligently. There's a saying that those in power should aid those in distress. If they don't, they might face consequences, just like the mouse who didn't help a gazelle when asked, leading to a tragic end." Curious, the king asked, "What's the story of the mouse and the eagle?" The story of the gazelle, the mouse, and the eagle. Once, a hunter set a trap and caught a gazelle. The gazelle was struggling, and it noticed a mouse watching. The gazelle called out to the mouse, saying they didn't know each other, but the gazelle saw kindness in the mouse's appearance. The gazelle hoped the mouse could help by chewing through the trap's ropes. In return, the gazelle promised to serve the mouse. However, the mouse said it was too risky, fearing the hunter. The mouse walked away, leaving the gazelle trapped. But before the mouse reached its hole, an eagle grabbed it. The hunter later found the trapped gazelle and was struck by its beauty. He didn't want to harm it and carried it to the market. On the way, the hunter met a kind man who saw the gazelle's beauty. He didn't want to harm it either. He bought the gazelle, set it free, and said that those who save innocent lives won't suffer unjust harm. I've shared this story so you understand that I'm asking you to protect me and arrange for my well-being when you're not here. I'm suggesting that you assign this responsibility to a trustworthy friend who can ensure my safety. This way, our brotherly bonds will remain strong despite any competition." "I know many friends," the king responded. Proud monarchs and sovereign princes who would never hesitate to help you if you were in need or facing difficulties. They wouldn't withhold aid. But I have a specific friend in the land of Khorasan. He's well-traveled and experienced with people, has a good character, a kind heart, and knowledge in various fields. If you want, I can introduce you to him and trust him with your well-being, regardless of changing circumstances. The prince replied, there are different types of friendship. Some friends expect you to help them achieve their desires. If you let them down, their friendship fades, and it might even turn into enmity, like what happened with the self-centered man in his dealings with Na-Khura. Curious, the king asked, what's the story of that? The story of the man of ambition and Na-Khura. I've heard, said the prince, that in Syria there was a wise king who loved philosophy and poetry. Among his court members was Na-Khura, who, though lacking in merit, was highly favored due to the trend of the time. One day, a man from a distant land arrived at the king's palace. He hoped to find refuge and security under the king's patronage, drawn by the tales of the king's generosity and kindness. This man was friendly, smart, and had a pleasant appearance. He had a charming way of speaking and his company was enjoyable. He approached Na-Khura with confidence, even being willing to stay in his company for a year or two, hoping to gain access to the king through him. He dropped hints that he wished Na-Khura's help to meet the king and join his service. Could you help me get a chance to meet the king? He asked. I want to be part of his circle. But Na-Khura paid no attention to his request. After a year of futile attempts, the ambitious man lost hope in Na-Khura's assistance. He left, burning the bridge of gratitude and expressing his frustration with disrespectful words. He even wrote a letter to the king, making false accusations against Na-Khura. Na-Khura is suffering from a dreadful disease that even doctors avoid. When the king read the letter, he ordered that Na-Khura be barred from the court and palace due to the false accusations. So, when Na-Khura arrived at the palace gates, he was denied entry and turned away. Stripped of court favor and banned from service, Na-Khura endured this situation for a whole year. He endured this hardship and suffering, trying to understand why his situation had changed and what had caused the accusations against him. When he finally learned the truth, he gathered trustworthy men, court officials, and those who were close to the king. In their presence, he revealed his body, proving there was no defect. They reported these facts to the king, dispelling the doubts that had arisen. However, the king admitted, it's said that throwing mud against a wall leaves a trace, even if it doesn't stick. Seeing Na-Khura will remind me of that accusation. I'll feel a distaste and unease when I see him. It would take considerable self-deception to overcome that aversion. As a result, the king ordered Na-Khura to be sent to a distant province. I've shared this story to make the point that if your friendship with someone might lead to negative outcomes, it's worth considering, the prince explained. The king replied, our friendship is free from personal ambitions or ulterior motives. My friend is genuinely devoted to me. The prince responded, there's another kind of relationship that can exist among kin or fellow tribesmen. When one person holds a higher position or wealth, and another seeks to attain that level, tensions can arise. The situation often leads to a struggle for dominance. This was the case with the Sultan of Babylon and the prince. Curious, the king asked, tell me more about that story. The Sultan of Babylon and the prince. In the land of Babylon, there was a king who had a young son. As fate took hold of the king's hopes and his life came to an end, he appointed his brother to take his place in ruling the realm and looking after the interests of the land. He also made his brother the guardian of his son, responsible for his upbringing and education. He said, I'm entrusting you with the authority to govern and make decisions for the kingdom. However, I have one condition. When my son grows up, gains knowledge, and becomes capable of ruling, you must relinquish your power to him. You should consider yourself subservient to him and follow his command. I hope you won't find his authority burdensome, and I urge you to remain obedient to him. If envy or treachery ever tempt you to betray him, remember the command. Allah commands you to return to their owners the things you hold in trust. The two brothers agreed to these terms. After the father's death, the young prince grew up and reached an age where he could rightfully claim the throne. However, the reigning king was deeply attached to his own power, and the allure of control had blended with his nature. He feared that the young prince, having come of age and learned about the affairs of the state, would demand the throne, which could lead to conflicts with powerful nobles in distant regions of the kingdom. The king realized that refusing the prince's demand could alienate these nobles, leaving him without their support. He thought, I must find a way to remove him without raising suspicion of his demise. This is the only way to maintain stability. The Sultan of Babylon and the Prince. One day, the Sultan declared his intention to go hunting, accompanied by the prince. When they reached the hunting grounds, they found a secluded spot away from their retinue. There, the Sultan instructed the prince to dismount, and shockingly, he took it upon himself to blind the young prince. After blinding him, the Sultan left the area. Though the prince lost his physical sight, he gained a unique insight into the secrets of destiny and the hidden workings of the world. He could perceive things beyond the material realm. As night fell, he sought refuge in a cave and later climbed a tree to evade wild animals. Beneath this tree lived a leader of supernatural beings known as Paris. Each night, the Paris gathered under the tree to converse and share news from around the world. During their conversation, one of the Paris mentioned the Sultan's treacherous actions. The leader of the Paris revealed that the prince could restore his sight using a certain leaf from the tree and that a tamarisk tree in a thorn brake held a snake that needed to be defeated to bring about the Sultan's downfall. Their destinies were intertwined due to a shared astrological connection, and when the dominant star aligned, the prince's actions against the snake would lead to the Sultan's demise. Acting on this information, the prince regained his sight using the leaf and then successfully defeated the dangerous snake at dawn. The Sultan's life ended, and the prince claimed the throne, returning to the capital as a triumphant ruler. The prince shared this tale to caution against friendships that might resemble the Sultan's harmful actions. The king assured the prince that their friendship wasn't tainted in that way. The prince then explained another kind of friendship, where people, in times of trouble, try to save themselves by dragging their friends into their calamity, much like the story of the blacksmith and the traveler. The king was curious to hear this story. The blacksmith and the traveler. Once upon a time, a traveler who had journeyed across the world arrived at a village. There, he came across a deep, dark well that seemed to extend endlessly into a pit of gloom. At the bottom of the well, a demon was trapped, and some children were throwing stones at him. The traveler observed the situation and felt a sense of compassion, even though demons were known to be wicked creatures. He believed in showing forgiveness for misdeeds that hadn't harmed him directly. With a heart full of mercy, he approached the well, rescued the demon from his torment, and set him free. The demon was surprised by this act of kindness, as demons and humans were considered incompatible. Grateful for the traveler's compassion, the demon offered to help him in return. He told the traveler that if he ever found himself in a dire situation similar to the one he was in, he should call upon the demon's name, and the demon would come to his aid. After their conversation, the demon disappeared, and the traveler continued his journey until he reached the city of Zamarin. In the city, he stayed with an old friend who happened to be a blacksmith. He chose this friend's house due to their strong bond and past friendship. The blacksmith and the traveler. Once, there was a traveler who had journeyed across the world, exploring far and wide. One day, he arrived at a village and noticed a deep well. Inside this well was darkness like a painful night, a pit of despair, darker than the depths of hell. It seemed as if all the remains of crushed bodies and ashes from the fires of hell had been gathered there. It was as dim as foolish advice and as dull as lifeless faces. In this well, a demon was trapped, and children were pelting him with stones from above, much like meteors against Satan. The demon was trapped, just like the trapped genie in a magician's bottle. The traveler, moved by compassion, approached the well and rescued the demon, despite knowing demons were wicked. He believed in forgiveness for wrongs that hadn't personally harmed him. The demon, surprised by this act, thanked the traveler and offered to repay him. He promised to help the traveler in his time of need if he called upon the demon's name. Grateful, the traveler continued his journey. In a city called Zamarin, the traveler stayed with an old blacksmith friend. This city had a strange custom. Every year, a newcomer or a citizen chosen by lot was sacrificed. The blacksmith was chosen by the lot that year. He informed the authorities about the traveler's arrival and the city's custom. They took the traveler away for execution. Remembering the demon's promise, the traveler called out the demon's name, and the demon appeared. The demon entered the body of the ruler's son, causing chaos and confusion in his movements and speech. The story serves as a lesson about the dangers of ill-intentioned friendships and the unpredictable nature of certain friendships and alliances. In that city, there was a yearly custom. A newly arrived stranger would be sacrificed, and if no stranger was found, a citizen was chosen by lot. This time, bad luck struck the blacksmith, and he was selected. Seeing the traveler, the blacksmith hurried to the mayor's house and informed the authorities. They took the traveler for execution. The blacksmith found himself in deep trouble. After a while, he remembered the demon's promise. He called out the demon's name, and the demon appeared, aware of the situation and ready to help. The city ruler had a son with extraordinary sight, able to see the world for his father. The demon entered the son's body, causing chaos. The young man's movements became erratic, his speech nonsensical. The demon affected his entire being, from his breath to his eyes and limbs, causing immense pain and distortion. People gathered, mourning the young man's tragic transformation. The father was devastated. He tried various healers, but nothing worked. Desperate, he tried everything to save his son. He called for skilled physicians and healers, each attempting their own cures based on their knowledge. However, all attempts were futile. At the peak of the crisis and when everyone's grief was overwhelming, the demon spoke up. It revealed that the only cure for the afflicted young man was to release the stranger who had been detained for sacrifice without any reason. The prince immediately ordered the release of the stranger, which caused the demon to exit the young man's body. The demon warned the traveler that this was a one-time assistance and that he shouldn't expect further aid. The demon compared their situation to relying on a demon's rope to descend into a pit. The prince used this story to caution the king that if his friendship with the Kurasani had similar traits, he should be careful of the recommendations made by him. The king assured the prince that their association was free from such flaws. The prince then introduced the concept of another kind of friendship, one driven by natural desires and passions, which could easily be broken. He proceeded to tell the story of the duck and the fox. The king asked for the story. I've heard that there were once ducks nesting by a river bank close to a fox's den. The fox had fallen sick with mange, becoming emaciated and weak. A tortoise visited the sick fox and suggested that duck's liver could cure his ailment. The fox pondered how to acquire duck's liver and decided to deceive the duck by luring her into his trap. The fox went to the river and coincidentally met the duck. He engaged her in conversation and flattery, mentioning that her husband seemed interested in marrying another. He hinted that she should consider seeking someone else's attention, implying that she deserved better treatment. The duck, hurt by the news, responded that she had to obey her husband according to the sacred law. The fox responded by suggesting that she should also seek someone else's companionship since her husband's desires were elsewhere. He convinced her that she could leave her husband and marry someone else, promising a handsome partner. He presented himself as a suitable candidate for her new partner. He assured her that his looks were unmatched and suggested that she escape her unhappy situation. In response, the duck said, "I appreciate your kind words and generosity. However, a man is allowed by law to have up to 4 wives, and he's within his rights to consider it. He's thoughtful and well aware of the Quranic guidance, but if you fear that you will not do justice, then marry only one. He knows he can maintain fairness and justice between us. Just as a skilled warrior wields a two-handed sword and a strong person can handle a double load, a capable swimmer uses 2 pitchers while crossing a river. If he thought he couldn't manage 2 relationships with fairness, he wouldn't even entertain the idea. Even if the other woman acted negatively toward us or mistreated me, I'd still consider it my duty to be submissive to him." The fox, however, continued to manipulate the situation, telling her that her husband suspected her of having feelings for a younger suitor. He claimed to have tried to convince her husband otherwise, but to no avail. The fox's persistent cunning wore down the duck's defenses, and she eventually succumbed to his persuasion. "My friend," she said, "your words are full of kindness, Islamic values, compassion, and affection. I can now see the truth in what you've mentioned about my husband's behavior. I truly appreciate your good intentions and your genuine treatment of me. I understand that you would never suggest anything dishonest or untrue. Please advise me on how I can best escape from this situation." The fox responded, "I have come across a plant known as duck's death from India. If you can give it to your husband to eat, your plan will succeed." Grateful for the advice, the duck eagerly accepted the idea and consumed the plant as if it were a treat, falling right into the fox's trap. The fox vanished for 2 days, during which the duck's impatience grew as she awaited the poison. Frustrated by his delay, she finally went to his house to find out the reason for his absence. As soon as she entered, the fox seized the opportunity. He attacked her, tearing open her belly, proving that just as the peacock's tail can be its downfall, the duck's liver brought about her own demise. This tale illustrates that relying on a friend of such a nature is unwise. The king responded, "My son, my friendship with him is based on his knowledge, abilities, wisdom, his genuine care, and other qualities that have been tested over time. I chose him as a friend for his exceptional understanding, much like the merchant once chose his friend." The prince inquired, "Could you please tell me the story of that merchant and his friend?" The merchant and his wise friend. The king continued, "There was once a merchant who had a son born under a fortunate star. The young man was tall, spirited, and physically strong, exuding goodness and noble actions. One day, while teaching his son, the merchant emphasized the importance of having a true friend in life. He gave his son 1,000 dinars and instructed him to journey far and wide to find such a friend, comparing it to encircling the earth like the moon's orbit. The hope was that the son would encounter someone with qualities akin to Jupiter, bringing good fortune through friendship. The son followed his father's advice and set out with the money. However, he returned unexpectedly soon. The merchant, sensing a mistake due to his son's lack of experience, asked what had happened and what kind of friend he had found. The son replied, "I've actually made 50 friends, each a paragon of virtue with numerous qualities. I've repaid the wisdom you shared by trusting my own judgment." The merchant, skeptical, responded, "I fear your tale of friends is akin to the story of the countryman." Perplexed, the son asked, "What happened in that story?" The countryman and his son. The merchant went on, "There was once a wealthy countryman who owned vast lands and properties, and his wealth was as abundant as the treasures of the earth. He had a habit of offering his son valuable guidance, emphasizing the importance of managing money wisely, keeping track of income and expenses, and living in a way that avoids wastefulness and extravagance. At the core of his teachings was the significance of choosing friends wisely, considering it the most crucial matter. He would tell his son, 'My child, don't squander your wealth carelessly, lest you find yourself overwhelmed by troubles. Select friends based on their intellect, so you don't end up disliking those who possess wisdom. Strive to gain knowledge, for a life without learning is fruitless. Remember that this world is fleeting and insignificant, and what truly matters is having good friends and acquiring knowledge.'" Despite this guidance, after his father's passing, the son disregarded these lessons. He wasted his inheritance recklessly, squandering his wealth without thought for profit or loss. His mother, a wise and insightful woman, advised him to heed his father's words. She cautioned him against giving away all his wealth thoughtlessly, explaining that if he depleted it without reason, he wouldn't have it when he truly needed it. She urged him to scrutinize potential friends before trusting them and to differentiate between genuine sincerity and mere words. At these words, the young countryman felt a desire to test the character of his companions. He approached one of them and, as an experiment, told him, "We have a mouse at home that causes a lot of damage. Last night, it even managed to eat an entire 10-mond mortar." The friend responded, "The mortar must have been greasy. Mice are known to be attracted to grease." Encouraged by his friend's gullibility, the countryman grew more confident in his friends and happily went to share the outcome with his mother. "I told them a lie," he said, "and they didn't object at all. They didn't call me a liar and accepted my false story without hesitation. His mother laughed at his words and remarked, "My son, while your story is amusing, it's also concerning to see your lack of insight. You should be wept over 1,000 times for failing to recognize true friendship from deceit. A real friend is one who tells you the truth, not someone who pretends your lies are true." Despite his mother's wisdom, he stubbornly replied, "Those who advise against sharing secrets with women or trusting them with opinions are right." Due to his foolishness and stubbornness, he squandered all his father's hard-earned wealth in pursuit of fleeting desires. He ended up impoverished, going from luxurious living to destitution, and his downfall was like a storm tossing him from prosperity into the dust of disgrace. One day, sitting with his friends, including the one he had previously tested, he lamented his poverty. He mentioned that the previous night, he had only a single piece of bread on his table, which a mouse had eaten completely. The friend who had previously supported his lies and nonsense with apparent truth, and even went out of his way to meet his false stories, now ridiculed and criticized him. He said, "Listen, everyone, to this unbelievable tale. How could a mouse possibly eat up a loaf in a single night? I've shared this story to help you see that friends who enjoy your hospitality and belongings may only care about your reputation as long as they see your money benefiting them or as a source of their own fortune. When they no longer see you as lucky or capable of helping them, they might label your truths as lies. Even if you were speaking nothing but the truth, they might twist it into falsehood. It's like a mug of ale that receives sweet kisses as long as it's full, but gets discarded when it's empty. I worry, my son, that your friends might fall into that category. I spent 80 years of my life observing the ways of the world when it comes to friendship and enmity. I finally found a special friend whom I cultivated through the good and bad times. How could you have found 50 such friends in just a few days? Show me your friends, and I'll demonstrate their true nature in terms of loyalty and companionship." The young man agreed, and as night fell, they took a sheep, wrapped it in blood-stained canvas, and loaded it onto a porter's back. The son went ahead and was instructed to approach one of his friend's doors, call him outside, and explain, "A notable man from the city came upon me unexpectedly while he was drunk tonight. He attacked me, and in self-defense, I pulled out a knife and accidentally fatally wounded him." In a situation like this, a person confides in a friend. "I trust you to help me bury the body here and clear my name from this stain of murder." The youth followed his father's instructions. They walked until they reached the house of a man the youth knew. He knocked on the door, and when the man came out, the youth repeated the prepared speech. The man's response was, "My house is small, already packed with my family and kids. There's no place to hide him here. Plus, my neighbors are always looking for faults and eager to make accusations. I'm sorry, I can't help." They moved on, using the same plan, visiting one friend's house after another. None were willing to help, and when every attempt had failed, the father said, "I've tested your friends, and it seems they're just like pictures on a wall to be admired, or like trees in a thorn brake that bear no profitable fruit and provide no shade for the weary to rest under. Now, let's try to find friends with more compassion." They first went to the acquaintance's house and called him out. The merchant explained the situation and asked for help to conceal the body. The acquaintance, however, declined, saying he had a small house and was not afraid of being accused of a crime. He suggested that the merchant or the slain man come alone, and he would do his best to assist discreetly. The merchant and his son left, and the merchant explained that this acquaintance was only a half-friend. They then went to the house of a true friend. When they arrived and explained their situation, the friend warmly welcomed them. He understood the importance of supporting a friend's cause and offered to help without hesitation. He believed that assisting friends in times of need was a duty dictated by the principles of chivalry and good conduct. He emphasized that even though the ability to help might be limited, one should not succumb to fear or despair. In plain terms, the merchant and his son approached an acquaintance first, who declined to help due to his limited resources. Then they visited a genuine friend who wholeheartedly agreed to support them, stressing the importance of aiding friends in times of trouble. The friend assured the merchant that he would keep the body hidden for the rest of his life, just as precious secrets are kept from rivals or enemies. He offered a private chamber for the merchant's stay, ensuring his comfort and well-being. The merchant, moved by his friend's kindness, revealed the true purpose of their test and explained that he had known all along about his friend's qualities. The king turned to his son and explained that he had carefully chosen this wise friend based on his genuine qualities. He advised his son to seek this friend's counsel and guidance in times of trouble or conflict. He emphasized that this friend's integrity and wisdom could serve as a refuge and a source of sound advice. After the king's passing, his eldest son inherited the throne and his other sons assumed their designated roles, as specified in the king's will. The unity and harmony among the siblings led to a prosperous and stable realm, as their actions aligned with their father's intentions, ultimately bringing about a successful outcome. King Ardashir, known for his justice and kindness, had a remarkably beautiful daughter. Her beauty was beyond comparison, and those who saw her were left in awe. She had never been seen by anyone other than herself in the mirror. When she reached marriageable age, many princes desired her hand, but she had not yet chosen a suitor. After some time, King Ardashir approached his daughter about the matter of marriage. He explained the importance of marriage, highlighting that daughters who delayed marriage might face difficulties. He suggested a suitable prince as a potential match. The daughter responded by expressing her belief that daughters brought challenges to their families while sons were blessings. She emphasized the responsibility of fathers to be patient and considerate when arranging marriages. The daughter believed that fathers should carefully scrutinize potential sons-in-law to ensure the best match for their daughters. She noted the duty of guardianship and the importance of choosing the right partner for their daughter's well-being. Her response reflected her wisdom and strong sense of independence. In a tale about King Ardashir and the wise sage Muranbi, it's recounted that King Ardashir was known for his justice and kindness. He had a daughter of extraordinary beauty. Her appearance was so remarkable that people couldn't help but marvel at her. Suitors from far and wide desired her hand in marriage, but she hadn't yet chosen a spouse. As time went on, King Ardashir approached his daughter about marriage. He explained that husbands are considered ornaments for women and protectors of their lives. He encouraged her not to be overly selective and disdainful towards marriage, as waiting too long could lead to difficulties. He mentioned that daughters who remain unmarried might face challenges and that it's better to marry suitably. The daughter, however, expressed a different perspective. She noted that sons are blessings, whereas daughters can bring hardships. She believed that facing tribulations in this world could lead to rewards in the hereafter. She acknowledged the patience required of fathers in caring for their daughters and accepting the responsibilities they entail. Furthermore, it's a crucial responsibility for parents to carefully consider potential suitors when marrying off their daughters. The authority given to fathers for making such decisions comes with the expectation that they act in their daughters' best interests, guided by the love between parents and children. The daughter emphasized that marrying someone incompatible is worse than not marrying at all. She believed that true equality is hard to find, as worldly wealth can be fleeting and doesn't guarantee lasting happiness. She highlighted that genuine worth is found in self-control, reason, and humility, rather than mere social status. The king, determined to find such a man, embarked on a search. Eventually, he learned of a man named Sage Muranbi, renowned for his wisdom, self-discipline, and virtuous character. The king and his daughter agreed that he would be an ideal match. They sent an envoy to arrange the marriage, and once the bride price was settled, the daughter was married to the sage. Over time, the king inquired about the well-being of his daughter and son-in-law. He observed that their marriage was harmonious and brought greater joy than the alignment of favorable celestial bodies. Their union was a source of admiration and contentment. One day, driven by paternal concern, King Ardashir visited his daughter's home. He asked her how she and her husband were getting along. She expressed her approval of her husband's behavior and habits, except for one thing: he stored all his possessions together, including food, clothing, and household items. This seemed disorderly and impractical to her. The king decided to discuss this matter privately with Sage Muranbi. He asked the sage if he could separate his belongings, placing each type of item in its own designated space. The sage explained that he preferred to keep everything together as a symbol of contentment. He believed that dividing them would require more organization, potentially leading to the trap of avarice. In response, King Ardashir offered the sage his choice of luxurious mansions equipped with various furnishings and amenities. He assured the sage that he could have any comfort he desired, along with servants, guards, and an entire army if needed. The king believed in the importance of spacious homes, helpful servants, delightful foods, and comfortable clothing, echoing the sentiment that the world offers abundance in the form of luxurious living. It's well known, Sage Muranbi replied, that when the final reckoning arrives, which will bring an end to all pleasures, it will level the grand residences of princes and emperors just as it will humble the huts of widows. Calamitous death doesn't differentiate between palaces and shanties, and ruin can strike both the luxurious abode and the humble dwelling. Build your house as tall as the highest points, yet death will come to it. Raise your palace's dome to the heavens, but death will find it too. Death doesn't care about status or grandeur. As for your indulgence in pleasures like food, wine, and extravagant attire and furnishings, you should know that our physical desires, gluttony and lust, are never satisfied. One consumes endlessly, and the other adorns itself with excess. It's wiser to rein in these desires and follow a path of frugality, which is the path of truth. The keepers of power's treasuries are usually frugal, staying away from excesses that lead to destruction. My riches lie in knowledge and wisdom. The more I share them, the more they grow from the entire world. They require no guarding or custodians, and no conqueror can take them from me. When I pass away, they won't cease to exist. The rewards of such virtues will be multiplied in the next world, the sage added. Yes, they are better than mine, the king admitted. The sage continued, your bodyguard might demand too much from you. If you reduced their demands or restricted their greed, would they still be loyal? No. And if an enemy overcame you, would they remain faithful? Yes. My own bodyguard, the sage explained, consists of endurance and contentment. They only demand when appropriate and show gratitude when I have. They remain patient when I lack, unlike your bodyguard who could turn against you. I understand, said the king. The sage continued, wash your hands of the impurity and corruption of this world. How long will you befriend one who's ungrateful and unreliable? Avarice, which is a false friend that displays friendship but is truly an enemy, should not be allowed in. Once it enters, it destroys everything. Understood, said the king, but tell me about the story of the three partners. Once there were three robbers who partnered in ambushing travelers. They attacked people without mercy, causing misery along the roads frequented by travelers. One day, they stumbled upon the ruins of a building outside a city. Among the remains, they found a hidden gold casket beneath a stone. Thrilled by their discovery, they decided that one of them should go to the city and bring back food for their enjoyment. Reluctantly, one of the robbers went to buy food but poisoned it with a deadly substance, planning to eliminate the others and claim the treasure for himself. However, the other two robbers suspected his treachery and devised a plan. When he returned with the poisoned food, they attacked and killed him. They then ate the food, not realizing it was poisoned, and they also died. The sage shared this story to emphasize that one should never give in to the desires of the flesh, whether in small matters or significant ones. King Ardashir took the sage's wisdom to heart and accepted his advice, understanding the importance of restraining one's desires. Later, when King Ardashir returned to his daughter, he told her to consider herself fortunate for having a husband who was highly knowledgeable and followed the path of wisdom. He explained that her husband's conduct was upright, and it was acceptable to enjoy life's transient pleasures in this temporary world, as long as it was done in moderation. After these events, King Ardashir reflected on his life's accomplishments and decided to lead a purposeful life. He chose the path of righteousness, resisting the temptations of worldly desires until he passed away, maintaining his virtuous way of living. This concludes the chapter about King Ardashir and the sage Muranbi. The next chapter will focus on the demon Oxfoot and the sage Dini. This tale illustrates the significance of knowledge and how the fruits of knowledge, when put into practice, can have a profound impact. It also emphasizes how knowledge outshines its opponent, ignorance, in the game of life. IV the demon Oxfoot and the sage Dini. The prince continued. In ancient times, demons openly roamed the world, mingling with humans, seducing them away from the path of truth and leading them astray with illusions. In the land of Babylon, a pious man established himself on a mountain top, where he built a cell and dedicated himself to worship. His teachings spread far and wide, attracting numerous followers who abandoned the influence of demons and embraced a righteous life, turning toward the worship of God. The fame of this man reached every corner of the world, and people spoke of him as if he possessed a hidden knowledge. This decline in their power greatly troubled the demons, and they sought the guidance of their leader, the demon Oxfoot. He was a proud and malevolent creature, holding authority over the demon army. He was known for his devotion to evil and resisted holy incantations. His influence was immense, and he was a chief source of misguidance. Gathering before Oxfoot, the demons beseeched him for assistance in their dire situation. This man Dini, they said, has taken his place on this rock and shattered our influence over humanity. He has instilled courage in their hearts and erased their fear of us. If we don't act now to stop this and eliminate this problem, then tomorrow, when he performs his religious duties, our power will diminish even further, and we will have no choice but to submit to his will. Oxfoot was deeply affected by their words. His anger intensified, but he restrained himself from acting impulsively. I need time, he declared. While urgency demands immediate action, such matters also require thoughtful consideration. We can't rush into this without careful planning. He summoned 3 of his chief advisors, demons who provided counsel during times of crisis, and began to seek their advice. Addressing the eldest advisor, he asked, given the situation, what course of action do you propose? The advisor responded, wise minds understand that both fortune and life within the body are transient. Each has its limits and predetermined span. Just as a spirit can migrate from one body to another, fortune can transition from one favorable state to another. When someone is prosperous, they are shielded from troubles, and their foundation of success is invulnerable. This period is akin to a mountain that withstands thunder, lightning, hail, and rain without damage. However, when fortune wanes, it's like a tree that loses its vitality and becomes fragile. Even a gentle breeze can break its branches or uproot it. Collapse seems to come without clear cause, as dictated by the unpredictable turns of fate and the cycles of the heavens. Today, while fortune is aligned with this man's capabilities and fate favors him, any plan we devise to hinder him would likely miss the target. Our strategies to thwart his progress would likely fail. Instead, we should wait for his inherent vulnerabilities to come into play. We must stay vigilant, observing the moment when his prosperity begins to fade, and the ruler of his guiding star moves away from the house of success. When this occurs, we can stand against him, capitalizing on our own luck and his misfortune. Oxfoot then turned to the second advisor, seeking his perspective. The advisor responded, the first counselor's suggestion is reasonable, but it would be a mistake to refrain from action or delay in any way. As long as he's strong, postponing our offensive only strengthens him and weakens us. A wise person, even if fortune favors the opponent, would still exert all efforts against them while preserving their own resources. It's like a doctor who, unable to restore full health, conserves the remaining strength of a patient through careful treatment. If not, the patient would surely succumb. Therefore, we must use our full strength to dismantle this man's foundation. Even if he's gained authority over a people, we must enter the field of battle without fear of death. Facing an enemy requires a sword, not just a shield of friendliness for self-preservation. Lastly, Oxfoot addressed the third advisor, seeking his input before any decisions were made based on the other's opinions. He replied, what the others have suggested aligns with your own thoughts. People tend to be receptive to ideas that resonate with their preferences and spirit. Especially if words are spoken in a pleasing manner and adorned with sweet language, they can easily find a place in one's heart. Like using well-tempered steel to break other types of iron, eloquent words can penetrate the outer layers of people's behavior. There have been touching poems and clever witticisms that turned greedy people generous, cowards brave, wicked individuals virtuous, troubled minds calm, and simple-minded folks noble. In my opinion, even if it were possible, shedding the blood of Dini would bring us little benefit, as the consequences could harm us. Such a plan lacks prudence and foresight. If he were to be killed without a clear reason, a disgracing accusation, a manifest charge, or a solid argument, another religious figure would likely rise to take his place. This would continue to trouble us until the end of time, as most beings tend to favor the weak and harbor a dislike for the powerful. The better course of action and the preferable plan is this: utilize satanic whispers and magical craftiness to plant the seeds of worldly desires in his heart. Make him preoccupied and infatuated with the trivial pursuits of this illusory world. Present before him a captivating image of the luxuriously decorated walls of pleasure and indulgence. Let the alluring drops of lust flow from the branches of anticipation, blinding him to the serpent of fate waiting at his feet. Eventually, his followers will see how he's abandoned his ascetic practices and purity for worldly pursuits. They will believe your words when you expose his wrongdoing and spread his shameful deeds. They will turn away from him, and his influence will decline. Oxfoot found this advice to be the least self-serving and most practical. He said, "Your advice is excellent, and you've illuminated the right way forward. I now believe that we should engage in a public assembly where I will discuss the secrets of knowledge and the truths of various matters with Dini. This will expose his ignorance and defeat him in front of everyone. It's at that point that I will move to eliminate him. If we wait until after these initial steps, as you've suggested, his death will only be a waste of time." Then Oxfoot turned to the eldest advisor and asked for his opinion on implementing this plan. The advisor replied, "When a decision is between two opposing options, it's not rational to choose one side exclusively and consider only one possibility. Many falsehoods have been dressed up as truths by imagination, much like the story of the double-sided son of the hospitable man." Oxfoot then asked him to explain the story of the double-sided son, and the advisor continued. "Once there was a man known for his generous and hospitable nature. He took great pleasure in welcoming travelers, providing for them with open-heartedness. His kindness extended to all, and his generosity was unmatched. His wealth was earned through honest means, not by exploiting others. In contrast to today's world, where many accumulate wealth by unethical means, causing harm to others and showing no compassion. Nowadays, people only cook food in their kitchens after setting fire to others' crops, and they place a small piece of bread on their tables only after causing harm to the less fortunate. This world has become a place where cruelty is rampant, and people's actions are driven by greed. This man's generosity and hospitality became renowned, and even the most virtuous people learned from him how to practice true kindness and hospitality. The welcoming gestures that many reserve for guests were his everyday actions. The vinegar of miserliness that others pour on their interactions with guests was used by him only to flavor his food. One day, a valued guest arrived at his door. The host greeted him warmly and offered him all the hospitality and attention he deserved. After they finished their meal, the host regretfully mentioned that he had only a little wine left. He expressed that in times of life's difficulties, nothing polished the soul like wine. He shared how wine could ease social awkwardness and provide solace in moments of solitude. Due to recent gatherings, there was just one bottle of wine remaining. He asked his guest if he would like to share it. The guest left the decision to the host, who then instructed his son to retrieve the bottle from a designated place. However, the son had a visual impairment that caused double vision, and he lacked sound judgment. When he saw the bottle, its image was duplicated due to his condition. He returned to his father and said, "There are two bottles. Which one should I bring?" The father understood the situation but was concerned that the guest might misconstrue the situation, thinking he had hidden a second bottle. Fearing that the guest might view him as thoughtless or deceptive, the father devised a solution. He told his son to break one of the bottles and bring the other. The boy followed his father's instructions and struck one of the bottles with a stone. However, he couldn't locate another bottle, and he returned to his father feeling defeated. The guest understood that the problem lay not with the father's intentions but with the son's impaired vision. I've shared this story to highlight that even the most reliable sense, sight, can still be subject to errors. If our sense of sight can be mistaken, then inner faculties like insight, which penetrate beyond appearances, are even more susceptible to inaccuracies. It's crucial to approach this situation thoughtfully, ensuring we're on the right path before taking any action. Humans possess a higher level of knowledge, perception, and intelligence compared to other animals. Each person is guided by celestial stars, which watch over them like caregivers, and they have guardian angels providing wisdom and guidance. Despite these advantages, people often become ensnared by their desires and fall under our influence as demons. This raises the question: if humans, with all their resources and qualities, can succumb to such weaknesses, how much more vulnerable would we be, demons of darkness and barbarism, if we let our desires control us without any thought? We must consider the potential consequences before seeking supremacy. Oxfoot replied, acknowledging the truth in what was said. However, he believed that with clever strategy, wisdom, and practical knowledge, they could still overcome their adversary, much like the mouse did against the serpent. The other counselor asked about this mouse and serpent story. Oxfoot answered, saying that there was a tale about a mouse and a serpent. Once, a mouse lived comfortably in a rich man's house. It had found a way to the garden and enjoyed safety and health. But one day, a huge serpent came from the desert, thirsty and seeking water. It entered the garden and saw the mouse's cozy dwelling. To the serpent, it seemed like a paradise. So, the serpent settled there as if it had found a treasure. The mouse, returning home, saw the serpent taking over its house. It was heartbroken and questioned why this trouble had come to it. It wondered if it was facing the consequences of its bad deeds or if it was being punished for causing harm to others. The mouse then went to its mother for advice on how to get rid of the serpent. The mother advised it to be cautious like the lizard that stays safe in its nest and not to be like the locust that gets eaten. She said that the mouse should find another home and be content with what it has, as it's not strong enough to fight the serpent. The serpent's power is too great, and even mighty creatures fear its fangs and venom. Indeed, it is a hard trial to leave behind a familiar home and face uncertain conditions. Seeing others enjoy what you've prepared for yourself can be painful. Yet true courage is shown when someone, faced with necessity, bravely sets out on a new path, determined to rebuild and find security once again. The mouse replied that the advice was appreciated but not satisfying. It believed in standing up against wrongs and injustice as long as there's strength left. Brave souls don't back down from a fight and don't surrender to cowardice. The mother warned that taking on the serpent would be a deadly mistake. Even with all the support of fellow mice, it would end in destruction. She used examples to explain that certain tasks are impossible, like trying to reach the sky through a window or trapping an eagle with a spider's web. The mouse insisted it had a plan to trick the serpent and eventually make it defeat itself. One day, the mouse saw the serpent entering the garden and sliding under a rose bush where he usually rested. Unaware of the impending twist of fate, the serpent fell asleep under the warm sun. Coincidentally, the gardener was also taking a nap nearby. The mouse saw its chance and leapt onto the gardener's chest, waking him up. It did this repeatedly, infuriating the gardener. He grabbed a heavy club and, when the mouse jumped on him again, he sprang up in anger and chased after it. The mouse led him towards the serpent's hole, where it disappeared. The gardener, still furious, brought down the club on the serpent's head, killing it. I shared this story to emphasize that sometimes intellectual prowess and cleverness can be more effective than physical strength. When facing a challenge beyond one's physical capabilities, using intellect, wisdom, luck, and guidance can lead to success. The counselor agreed with the points made but added that when someone has dedicated a substantial amount of time to a field of study, gaining deep knowledge and reputation within it, competing against them can be difficult. Dini's expertise in learning, philosophy, and various sciences would likely overshadow any attempt by Oxfoot. The counselor warned that a confrontation would expose the difference in knowledge and might lead to failure, citing the example of Buzurjmir and King Chosroes. Oxfoot asked for the details of that story. Buzurjmir and Chosroes. Once, early in the morning, Buzurjmir approached Chosroes and advised him to rise while it was still night if he wanted to achieve success. However, Chosroes had spent the previous night indulging in revelry and entertainment, and Buzurjmihar's words were seen as a rebuke. Annoyed, Chosroes instructed his servants to play a prank on Buzurjmir by stripping him of his clothes while he was on his way to work, without causing any harm. Following the prank, Buzurjmir returned home, changed his clothes, and then appeared before Chosroes. When questioned about his lateness, he explained that robbers had attacked him and stolen his clothes, forcing him to find new attire. Chosroes then pointed out the irony that Buzurjmihar's advice was to rise early, yet he had been delayed. In response, Buzurjmir cleverly retorted that the robbers must have risen even earlier in the night than he did, leading to the success of their plan. Chosroes was embarrassed by the clever and truthful reply, and he was persuaded by its logic.